Geocachomaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to GeoGearHeads episode 173. We're going to talk about kayaking and geocaching today, but every week we come to you with a whole bunch of goodness for geocachers, location-based gamers, and just tech enthusiasts in general. Normally we're here, just Bad Cop and I, and sometimes we have a guest. Tonight we're honored to have two different guests, so let's welcome the Land Monkeys to talk about kayaking.
Hello, it's Mr. Land Monkey and
Mrs. Land Monkey.
Now, if you don't know the Land Monkeys, then apparently you're not watching my other podcast, Caching in the Northwest. Land Monkey and I are co-host on that with Wits End, so we meet every week after this podcast, a couple hours after this podcast, and we talk about just regional Northwest caches and cachers. So it's a real privilege to have Mrs. Land Monkey on the show with us tonight. In fact, is this not your first podcast debut?
Mrs. Land Monkey?
Possibly. I'm not sure if I interjected on one other one, I think a long time ago.
But she's doing laundry and walking through the studio.
Oh, okay. Very good. Well, I guess it isn't your first video podcast because Land Monkey, you also do your own Land Monkey geocaching adventures. That's the LMGA series, correct?
We do, on YouTube. You can find us if you Google Land Monkey or if you search on YouTube for Land Monkey, and you'll see how Mrs. Land Monkey makes a very good stepladder.
Oh.
It's just funny. Wits End and I were talking about that today. We determined we will never be a stepladder for you. So, Mrs. Land Monkey, that's your job. We're going to let you do that.
Okay.
Well, enough with the introductions. We have a question that we ask each show. And, the next show we come up, we ask what that question is, we pick a winner, and that winner gets some fabulous prizes. So, last week's question was, from what language does the word kayak originate? Now, another part of this question and answer thing is we always have the guest answer the question. And, in fact, tonight I'm really happy to say I don't have to say this word. So, Mr. and Mrs. Land Monkey, would you be so kind?
He's going to say it.
So the answer to the question of what language does the word kayak originate from is Greenlandic Inuktitut, which is a variant of the Inuktitut language, not the Canadian, but Greenlandic. So that is the answer. And I believe the Daryl, if I've got this right, the cacher who successfully answered that question is J. Corey C.
I believe that is the correct pronunciation, and he has not yet picked his prize from coinsandpins.com, but thank you again to coinsandpins.com for donating that prize. And don't forget that we are going to have another question at the end of this show for which you can enter to get another one of those coinsandpins.com prizes. And since next week is a randomized show, tune in live and you could actually get a chance to win something really cool from coinsandpins.com.
So that's 2 chances next week if you listen live.
Exactly. And that's at 9:10 p.m. Eastern, 6:10 p.m. Pacific on Thursday nights. You can tune in every Thursday night. You might not get a prize normally, but it's kind of fun to tune in and try to distract us through the live Q&A.
That's usually my job.
Yeah, it's the shiny objects.
Squirrel.
Yeah, I was going to just say, Chris and I are like the dogs from Up. Squirrel. Well, how did you guys actually get interested in kayak and start doing the kayak caching?
Well, guys, we've actually been boaters for many, many years, mostly canoeing. But recently we started investigating and purchased a 2-person inflatable kayak and started kayak caching that way. We haven't done much of it yet, but we've gotten started and really enjoying it. We have friends last summer who were kayak caching, and we picked their brains about it, and they were enjoying their photos of their adventures and thought, what a great idea. What a really good way of doing it. But the first time I really heard about a lot of, maybe let's say, high density kayak caching was when I visited Florida for work, and I got to know the folks at the Space Coast Geo Store down in Florida. You guys familiar with them? They raved about the kayak caching in the swamplands in Florida. They seem to prefer that over walking through the swamps with alligators and snakes. So it seemed like a good idea.
So were they using inflatable kayaks with the alligators?
I'm suspecting not, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, I'm thinking that the kayak becomes that distraction. So when you get in range of the alligator, it attacks the kayak, and you have a chance to get away.
Well, I was thinking the kayak's kind of like the crunchy taco shell, and you're the filling. Where the inflatable kayak, that'd be more your soft taco.
There you go.
Any thoughts? Not about tacos, but
okay.
kayak.
Now she's hungry. It's time for taco dinners.
Well, we started looking into kayaks and kind of compared notes with our friends, and they actually found the model we ended up buying. So we have matching kayaks, which is kind of funny, but we haven't done as many caches as we'd like to get to yet, but summer is coming and it's getting warmer, although today's not so nice out. But we ended up buying the inflatable Sea Eagle 370, and we bought the Pro package. It has upgraded seats. You may not know what that means, but they
Does that mean it's in first class then?
Yes, I'm up at the front of the kayak.
No, that's right. You're in first class.
I
I'm
get
the coach.
first class, you're economy.
No, he's in business class.
Oh.
He's in the business.
I get the business, all right.
But I believe with those seats, they are taller, and they have straps, I guess, just to kind of hold it into place. So, if you want to stretch back and relax and let the person in the paddle or in the back paddle, the seat doesn't flop over, so it kind of holds it. It was quite comfy anyways, but the only thing I had with that was we had bought some life jackets, and I guess my life jacket with the padding on the back is just a little bit, I don't know if it's higher or lower, I don't know, but it kind of sits on the top of the seat. It's kind of hard to explain, but I just kind of have to figure out how to make that part a little more comfy. But anyways, that's what the Pro package was. It was extensions of the seats, and I think the Canoe is actually a little bit longer.
The kayak, yeah. Yep.
Kayak. Sorry, I'm still stuck on canoes.
The 370 Pro is just slightly longer.
Slightly longer.
And it has a thicker hull material on it. So, again, because we've got a dog, a golden retriever, who we haven't taken him out in the kayak yet, but we're planning to. We wanted to get the thicker material as well, which theoretically is rated, according to Sea Eagle, for bringing large dogs. But yeah, I would just add to what Mrs. Land Monkey was saying, to don't underestimate the importance of the seats in your kayak, and especially with inflatable kayaks, they're inflatable seats. So they're not going to be necessarily rigid, which is why with the Pro package and the straps on the side, it gives an extra rigidity, I would say, a word that you probably wouldn't use.
No.
I was going to say, one of the things that I like about the thicker material is it gives you a little bit more protection from popping when the alligators attack.
Yes. Well, we don't have a lot of alligators in the Northwest, but we've got sharp rocks.
Yeah, I believe it's a 2-bite minimum now with the thicker material for the alligators.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I think I read that on the website.
Excellent.
Now, as we kind of joked earlier, a kayak or sea taco isn't necessarily the best boat for all boat attribute caches. So what do you have to do to understand the limitations before you go out, and why did you choose just a kayak? Or why did you choose a kayak over a canoe or even a collapsible boat?
Well, The most common answer is to get the caches you can't reach by foot. There's a lot of Terrain 5 caches that pop up on your map, and there's a few around here that you need a boat. And depending on where that cache is, a kayak can be the perfect answer for making that into a smiley. I don't know. It's a little different. You know, it was something to try other than a canoe for once, and maybe a little bit easier to pack up and go rather than maybe a little lighter as well than trying to lug a canoe around, because I think from carrying the canoe the last couple times, you know, you start up with your arms up really high, and after it gets lower and lower until finally it's resting on your head as you going, I can't see where I'm going. But anyways.
And you're in the front, right?
What's that?
And you're in the front, right?
Yes, I was in the front.
You can't see where you're going. Okay. The person in the front doesn't need to see where they're going.
So I've got to ask if Mr. Canoehead is just a thing that us Canadians know, or have you heard of Mr. Canoehead?
I don't know Mr. Canoehead. Daryl?
I recognize the term, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
I'm assuming it's a man with a canoe on his head.
It is. It's a. It was from a really crazy Canadian sitcom, and the concept was he was portaging his aluminum canoe, got struck by lightning. The canoe was arc welded to his head, and now he's Mr. Canoehead.
This sounds like something from the Red Green Show.
Yeah, not far off. Anyways,
nice.
There's the shiny object.
Well, that was a really good use of the word portage, because that's the technical term when carrying a canoe or a boat. You portage it. So, nicely done. You are longtime boaters, I can tell. You use fancy words.
And we're Canadian, eh?
Oh. So,
yeah.
You'd mentioned you've done research on kayaks to determine what was the best one. Can you give us some of those steps, some of those, things that you were looking at to determine this particular kayak versus a canoe or some other boat?
Absolutely. So some of the things that you should really consider when you're thinking about getting some sort of boat for geocaching, because as Mrs. Land, I was going to stop, pause, and make sure I say Mrs. Land Monkey.
You don't want her secret identity to become
That's
known.
right. She's in her superhero costume right now. I don't want to. No. Okay, back on track. The questions that you're thinking about, if you're going to go after those in the water or on small island geocaches, obviously you're going to need some sort of boat. So then you need to start to work through and consider what kind of boat. So kind of the three main ones that you would use for paddling would be a kayak, canoe, or some form of rowboat, whether it's a smaller inflatable or collapsible or etc. If you start getting into power boats, then you're in a whole another conversation that we're not really doing justice to tonight, because we're talking about small outings.
And some places don't allow motorized vehicles.
Good point. A lot of boats don't allow
boats.
don't allow motors on the lakes, and some rivers. So yeah, to that, if you're going to be using, that's one thing we wanted to mention. If you're used to canoeing, if you've canoed for years and accustomed to it like we were, and you get a kayak, particularly an inflatable one, there's a very significantly different balance experience that you need to get acclimatized to. You will initially get the feeling like you're going to tip over, and hopefully you won't. We haven't. But it's really
that might be
different.
on a future episode.
It'll be a future episode of Land Monkey's Geocaching Adventures, filmed underwater. So sort of back to the topic, things to consider when you're looking at what kind of a boat you're going to get. Do you cache by yourself or as a couple or small family, I guess, is another thing. So think about how many people generally are going out on your caching adventures. Are you going to be, I guess in the same line of thinking, are you going to be bringing pets or kids with you. We kind of think of pets and kids as the same thing now that ours are almost adults.
Same amount of hair.
Yeah.
same willingness to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you give them food. Yeah. Another thing to consider when you're looking at what kind of boat to get is how experienced you are as a paddler. Are you an experienced paddler? Are you a novice? What's your comfort level going to be when you get that boat in the water the first time? What kind of trips are you looking at doing? Are you purely just going to do short point-to-point, we call them paddling grabs, the boating equivalent of a park and grab, where you're just going to put it in, you're going to go out at this small island in the lake and come back? Or are you planning to do longer trips, perhaps even overnights? So those are things to think about. And of course, related to that is, where are the paddle-oriented caches relative to where you live? Are they generally just short jaunts, or are you going to need to do a bit more of an adventure, or are you planning on going for a road trip somewhere and doing an adventure with your paddling? And in that case, what kind of a vehicle do you have? Because you're going to need to transport the boat, whether it's a kayak or a canoe or whatever it is.
How about a hovercraft? I think I want a hovercraft.
Ooh. Talking Florida again, aren't you?
No. They actually have a couple of them up just north of me in the St. Clair River, just to get like back and forth across the river to the islands. But they've got some that are like little 1- and 2-person, look like rowboats with a big fan.
Oh, those are they called fan boats?
Yeah, no, these aren't. These are actually hovercrafts.
But
yeah,
Daryl's talking about
different.
hovercrafts.
Oh,
I've
sorry.
seen those that you're talking about, Daryl, the 1- or 2-person hovercrafts. Those things they're cool.
They're very
I want one
cool.
too.
They're little build-your-own
Oh,
kits, as I
no.
understand.
Oh, I the only hovercrafts I know are large, 6-8 people hovercraft. So this is interesting. Now I got to go look.
Yeah.
Hold on.
One of the
Can we
reasons
stop
I
the
get
show
into-
so I can go look?
We can stop the show for a little while. You can get off and do that,
Okay.
and we'll continue on, and then you can rejoin us at the next station stuff. But no, one of the reasons that they actually do like those north of here is when you get the ice forming on the river, you can still go across, whereas the regular, planing hulls and stuff can't get across without risking damage.
Right, where you have to engage in portage across ice. Not a good.
It's
Depends
not
how thick
it's
the
not
ice
thick
is.
enough for that yet.
And how thick the geocacher is.
In our case, pretty thick.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh my!
Not going any farther there.
No, we're gonna
I
get
can
back on
insult you
track.
all I want because your wife is there listening. This
So
opens up a whole new category of insult for me.
That's just great. I appreciate that. So, getting us back on track, Mrs.
Oh,
Line
okay.
Monkey. I threw out some questions and some criteria that you could look at.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on how you could narrow down the criteria?
I would say research the manufacturers and look into the details of each of the kayaks as to what you want. And we also asked around at the geocaching events because we did see photos and things from other cachers that kayak and got their opinions. You can look on the forums. And we do have some meetup groups as well. So there's some suggestions of places that you can go to narrow down at least and figure out what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense to me.
Well,
But I
so
was there.
getting started in the kayak caching, what are some of the main lessons that you've picked up doing that? Any essential accessories that they're going to want to consider before they go out on the lake or river?
Well, read the instructions on the assembly and use. And I would say when you first start off, practice in shallow, calm waters. Don't go out on a rough day. Spend the time and money to get a good paddling life jacket. They allow more arm movement than a standard life jacket. And that was one of the things I think we noticed. So we got ones that are cut a little more in.
Got them over
But,
there, actually.
oh, okay. But, yeah.
Do you want to here? Why don't you pop the headphones off? You can grab. We brought them into the Land Monkey Studios, so we can show you guys the difference with the paddling life jacket. Because I know it's really exciting and it makes great audio.
Well, while we're waiting, Bob says in the Q&A, this is Buffalo Bob. He likes the kayak purchasing tips. Avoid flat bottom kayaks. They tend to be difficult to steer. Extra effort, exerted, weaving back and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
And don't overlook the paddle. Go with a lightweight composite. When paddling several miles, a few ounces makes a big difference.
Great tips, absolutely. Yeah. The point about the flat bottom kayaks is really good advice, but you're not going to be able to pretty much, well, I don't know, there may be models of inflatable that aren't flat bottom, but most inflatables are flat bottom. So you will have to expect that, but that's really good advice. This is my paddling jacket, so it's nice bright safety yellow. The real key that you'll notice with paddling jackets, as we mentioned, is that there's not a lot of the floating material in the front. It's really cut wide. I'm not sure if you can see this, but it's really cut wide around the arms, and it's cut deep, so it goes quite low on the sides before it ties together at the bottom with the webbing and such. And that's really super important if you're going to do any kind of distance in your kayaking or canoeing either, any kind of paddling, because it won't take long before you're chafing up your sides on the vest, and then you'll really not be happy.
Yeah, because that means the ride back is not comfortable.
No. Some tips that I would share, Chris and Daryl, is learn basic water safety. If you're not familiar with water safety and you haven't boated a lot, really make a point of going out with some experienced paddlers or take a course before you invest in the boat. And we alluded to this earlier, but paddle together, and emphasis on the word together. If you're in a two-person boat, so synchronize your paddling. Don't fight each other, and remember that the back paddler is generally the one in control. One of the other things I'd throw out there is to invest in a kayaking or waterproof bag. We use the one, it's called a Yak Sack from Hydro Pack in Seattle. We've had it for almost 20 years. We got it when we were canoeing. Still have it. It's an amazing bag, and it sort of has a rollover top that seals up and clicks together. And they're fantastic because if you seal it with some air in it, they float as long as it's not filled with rocks.
Oh man, I can't take my rock collection kayaking with me.
Well, for some of us earth cachers, that might be a problem.
Oh, it's true.
Last thing I'll throw out there is something that I'm going to look at shortly because I'm starting to have a bit of a challenge with it, and it's getting paddling gloves to prevent chafing on your hand. I tend to get quite raw in the joint between the thumb and the rest of the fingers. It's just the shape of my hands and probably how aggressively I hold the paddle, but it's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, I generally find that gloves are great for all kinds of things that you might not otherwise have them, but especially when you're doing things like cycling is the big thing. I have to have the gloves or it just really kills my wrists and hands, and the gloves make all the difference in the world. Kind of like those
Absolutely.
padded shorts.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just listening to a biking podcast, and they mentioned that you crush the nerves in your hands if you don't have gloves on. And that adds to the wear. I'd never heard that before. So
Yeah, I've heard. Now that you mentioned it, I remember hearing something about that, and it can cause a lot of nasty problems in your hands down the road. But we do have a question in the live Q&A from Limax. He actually says there's some caches out on the bay, out on one of the islands, but they'd be difficult to get via a powerboat. If I wanted a craft that I could use in that kind of environment and also for lakes, I'm not sure. I'm sure I'd want a hard-sided kayak. What else should I look for?
Well, it really, I think something like that becomes really a question of decision between kayak or canoe to start with, and get a sense of what's going to work better. Again, if you're going to go solo, more often than probably a kayak. And the whole concept of hard side versus soft side, really the biggest decision maker for us when we went with soft side was largely just around the ability to compact it. We've got a lot of trips that we want to do and a lot of short runs. We could easily put a hard-sided kayak, two-person kayak on the top of our SUV if we wanted to, but we just increase our options of how we're going to get places with the soft-sided one, and we're not planning on doing any super long overnighters or anything like that as well, so at least not yet. We'll see. So again, that's another factor, but probably from what Limax is describing, sounds like he's got it pretty much narrowed down, but maybe use some of the other criteria we discussed earlier. And really, probably the number one best thing to do is go to REI, and I think REI does this. I know Mountain Equipment Co-op here does it. I don't know if REI does it or not, but rent one for the day.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to suggest that, and in many cases, you'll actually find on some of the more popular waterways there are operations right there, so you don't even have to transport it. You can just rent it for the day, and then you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if you're not used to being in the kayak where you're up a little higher, and I guess like even when we were climbing in and out of it feels like it's going to tip more than a canoe does. That you might not like that at all. And if you're by yourself and get out on the lake or something and it starts getting a little choppy, you might feel a little more comfortable having the canoe shape where maybe it doesn't rock as much as a kayak, but I don't know.
No, good advice.
Good advice, yes. Well, speaking of good advice, there is more Q&A in, the Q&A. This one is for another tip from Buffalo Bob. Tether your GPSR to your life vest or kayak. I've heard horror stories of people dropping and losing their devices in the water. Now, I've heard the same thing. Their GPS is on and they're just watching it sink to the bottom, and that light slowly fade.
And this stands true for any type of boat. I've heard a few stories and actually witnessed one where someone dropped their GPS getting onto a ferry.
Ay. Those are deep.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, very deep, and the worst part is they could see it glowing on the bottom.
Oh.
Something, I think it was like 15 feet deep, and there's no way to get it. Yeah, no, it was ice-cold water, too.
Sure, of course. So that's the only place to drop it. You're not going to drop it in the tropics where you can dive down in crystal clear water and say, hey, I'll go get that. Yeah, and as soon as that ferry takes off, that water is so murky, everything's stirred up from the bottom. You'll never find it. So, thank you, Buffalo Bob. Tie that sucker on in. Same with the bag that you had mentioned, Land Monkey. Make sure that's tied either to you or to the kayak. Even though it floats, you shouldn't risk your valuables, like say your wallet.
Yeah, if it floats, it means it can float away. Yeah.
Oh, good point. Hopefully you'll be in your kayak and you can go after it. Now, we've talked about losing things. Let's go on to finding things, specifically caches while kayaking. Do you have any advice about stopping or finding caches while in the kayak?
Well, I think the other day we had to figure out who was going to get out and get the cache. I mean, if it's in the water, or at least I was going to say one of them we went, it was on a structure that was out in the water, so we didn't really have to get out. You could just paddle up, and that wasn't too bad. But
a structure, that's a fancy way of saying a tree. Yeah.
It wasn't a tree. It was like a dog.
Yeah, you're
Come
right.
on.
Okay, fair enough.
I know what I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking. Oh, I wasn't sure. I thought you were talking about a different trip.
Yeah.
No worries. I'll be quiet now.
But definitely some of the other ones that are probably maybe that are closer to shore, but you would still have to get out there. Or I think just coming up, we were trying to take note of what was in the water, because if it starts getting shallower, you get the branches and stuff that's sticking out. But I know on one of them we pulled up, and I'm like, well, you get out and go get it. And he's like, well, I can't get out from back here. So then we had to paddle out and then reverse back in, and so that he could get out. So that's not really, I guess, a good explanation. But anyways, think about your footwear, because if you're out in the water, plan to get wet. Yeah.
Wellies are probably not a good idea to take kayaking.
Well, if you want to go straight to the bottom quickly, they're a great idea.
They'll fill up awfully fast.
You'll make a really good anchor.
But yeah, I didn't take my sandals with me last time, and it was, that was kind of dumb. So I've got my shoes tucked in, you know, it's in my bare feet, but then that doesn't help for when you get out of the boat. If you're, depending on what you're having to step on to get to the cache, that's not good either. And I don't think we've ever invested in those water socks or something.
Well, I used to have some a while ago.
But,
I will probably get some new ones this year.
So, yeah, you know, once you get your kayak, then it's, there's a few other things we still need to go get. But as for the GPS, I think I was clipping it onto the front of my life jacket. My life jacket. Sorry. But I think, I don't know, we might have to get a lanyard, because I'm thinking, depending on how I'm moving, I could probably whack that sucker off, and it would probably go.
Sorry, I'm laughing in the background when she says we could get a lanyard. Anybody who works in IT and has ever gone to any kind of conference, you've probably got a surplus of lanyards around. And
I have
Well,
seven.
you mean lanyard or
piece of rope?
No. I can't remember the clip.
Chicken?
Carabiner.
Clip. Thank you, carabiner.
Carabiner.
That's what I was thinking of.
I wasn't being helpful?
No.
Oh.
I thought it was just me he wasn't helpful with. I feel
Oh,
so
no,
much
he's
better.
like that all the time.
Now, in the cache description, does it say that it's accessible from the boat, or do you just assume if it's right on the shore?
Good question. Most of them, we haven't found a lot of kayak caches yet, but of the ones we've found, most of them, it has said in the description that you can, whether you can reach it from the boat or whether you have to get out. But that's assuming that the geocacher is going to read the description. So that becomes more important.
All those extra words.
Well, some of them will say it's out in the water, but mind you, when you're looking at your map, there are some that are quite obvious that they are out in the water, whereas I think there's a couple that we've gone and picked up in the kayak that have said, well, if it's a hot day, you could swim out to it if you want to, or, you know, so there's some, you know, that have, I guess, maybe that boat attribute, yeah. Which you wouldn't necessarily have to have a boat, but yeah, I would definitely say it's in the description, at least in BC. I don't know about other areas. But.
And while thinking about it, if the cache is hanging in a tree and the tree continues to grow, there's going to be a point where you're not going to be able to reach it from a sitting point. You'll have to stand up, which you may just end up in the water that way. So, so even, you know, if it's been a few years and they said, oh yeah, no, you can reach it from your boat, you may not be able to.
Good point.
Well, earlier on Google Plus, someone had posted in the event for this show, and that was KC9GBO. I love using my kayaks to access caches here in Wisconsin. I just got 2 more over the winter. Can you ask Land Monkeys if they have any suggestions on how to transport 3 on a Suburban? Thank you.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'd say go Cheeseheads. But see, we know a little bit about U.S. culture here.
Just the northern U.S.
Just the northern U.S. Yeah. Once you go south of the first row of states, we're hosed. But that was a great question. I thought that was really interesting, and it prompted me to go and do a little bit of research. As I said before, our 2-person kayak's inflatable, so racks really aren't an issue for us. It packs up into a bag that's about 1 meter tall and about 1.5 meters in circumference.
Do they know meters, or do they send?
If they don't, they're gonna have to figure it out.
Okay.
Meters are those things that the GPS goes into where you don't know how far it is.
Anything is,
Or
yeah.
is it
No, meters are the things you
feet?
put. The meters are the things you put coins into so you can park.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Sorry.
I haven't seen
Yes,
a round one of those.
3 feet in a meter. Mrs. Landmucky's trying to be helpful and say 3 feet in a meter. It's about a yard. I'm just talking over her.
Okay.
So the little bit of research we did resulted in finding that Rack Attack, Yakima, and Thule all do make great products, but as KC9 GBO pointed out, generally they're for 2 kayaks and not 3. But in doing my research this morning, I found that there was a great old thread on the paddling.net message board on the very topic. And Daryl, would you be able to put that link in the show notes for later?
That will be in the show notes.
Awesome. And basically, they summarize it down to 2 ways of dealing with it. Either you can buy more rack equipment, make use of J cradles to line them up 3 on a side, depending on how wide your vehicle is. Or the simplest method, which I thought was really clever, is to just make use of the straight bars for the rack and place the first 2 kayaks side by side, face down, then, face up, so hull down, and then put the third kayak, invert it on top of the other 2 in the middle, and reverse it. So put it backwards to the way the other 2 are and face down, and then put some foam padding and strap them down really well. And apparently a lot of people use that methodology and it works well, but I also have to throw out the caveat that I'm absolving myself of any insurance issues that arise from that advice.
My advice was just stack them like cordwood and tie them tight.
That works too.
I think it's cool that they actually have 3 people or 3 kayaks. I'm assuming that those are all single kayaks, and I guess that's something else to consider too if you're going to go out caching. You might not like being in a kayak with somebody else in the boat. And I think that was actually when we talked with our other cachers up here who do the kayaking, they also bought a 2-seater kayak. And now they're I think she was kind of wishing that they had bought 2 singles.
Yeah, they're still married.
Oh, yes.
I was going to say, I feel like we need to do some marriage counseling right here on the show.
And they still really enjoy it, is my understanding, but and I forget what the reasoning was of why they thought they would prefer being in a single kayak as opposed to a couple. So I mean that could change things too. So
yeah, I think that goes back to Daryl's point earlier of just rent one, rent a double, rent a single, try it out. But to your earlier point, really cool that group is going out with 3 kayaks. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And in a Suburban, you could put one of the back seats. I guess you got 2 back seats. You could put those down and throw one almost inside. But if you've got an inflatable, they're so much easier to transport. You don't have to have a Suburban. You could be in a large city and have a smaller car.
Yeah.
And still.
But as pointed out earlier, there's pluses and minuses to everything. If you get the inflatable, you get a lot more flexibility in how to carry it, but you don't have the same level of control that you get in a hard side.
And you get a lot more flexibility when you're in it. Now, this seems to be, pardon me, a very interesting topic to our Q&A listeners. We've got a couple more tips from the live Q&A. Johnny Be Good 9 says, make sure your kayak is secure when you get out to get the cash. It's embarrassing to have your kayak float down the river without you.
That would be very embarrassing.
Is that laughter out of experience or just the thought of?
Well, go ahead.
I'm thinking, we both haven't gotten out of the kayak yet to go grab something, but yes, the other day I was holding on to, I guess, the log that was beside us, and I let go for a minute or so, and then it was, I'm drifting away. Quick, paddle back.
Hello, I'd like to come home.
So I can understand that. I thought, we haven't both climbed out, I think, at a point where we've needed to tie it up yet. Usually when we both climb out, it's because we're done and we're on the shore.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing to think about.
It's really good advice, yeah.
Well, and more even from Nighthawk 700. He says, here's a tip for kayak caches that don't give you a launch point. He says, look at, And it's the same website, Land Monkey, that you had just mentioned, paddling.net/launches. They have a lot all around the country.
Yeah, that's a great website.
Well, Nighthawk 700 had also started a discussion on Google+. He said, my favorite kayaking cache adventure so far was on Dagobah.
That's a long paddle to get all the way to Dagobah.
That's a long paddle there, yeah. Well, I'm sure it was an inflatable kayak to get that far.
An inflatable Millennium Falcon? Sorry.
Wait. Well, okay, so we'll just include the link to the cache and his log. He also gave us that in the show notes, so anyone who wants to check that out can do that. He says that they have a few kayak cache trails within a few hours' drive from him in Baltimore. And now he has a second kayak and his friend C. Willie Penguin, and he are looking forward to knocking some of them out. The one on the eastern shore, Maryland and Delaware, are puzzles with geo-art in the shape of a rubber duck and a boat. Okay, now
Nice.
that sounds very appropriate for kayak caches.
Mm-hmm.
But he does want to know what are good containers to use for kayak caches. I thought a few areas that might be good places to hide, but now I need to figure out what to leave there. One is an island, so I can probably just put an ammo box or something tethered traditional container. But others may just have to tie to roots in the water, a bridge, pier, or whatever else I can find to use. And that got a lot of conversation going. He does have a conversation that he linked to from his local caching group web forums with some ideas for thermos bottles, and he said he never would have thought of that as his own. But DeBear said he's seen the thermos bottles used. They work decently, except you need to use the ones with the wider necks. The narrow ones make it almost impossible to extract the logbook without damaging things. And Stabies said that use a smaller container to hold the logbook inside of a thermos or water bottle. It doesn't need to be watertight, just able to be easily shaken out of the container. A cigar tube works nicely.
Well, that's a really good tip, yeah. So you're putting kind of a micro cache within a small cache just for the ease of getting it in and out of that smaller neck.
Yeah, and they do that a lot around me, period, in part because we tend to get a lot of water, especially in the thaw cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So they put them in with the waterproof containers. But we also got some questions, we also got a question in the live Q&A about the containers. So, Chris, do you want to read that one?
Yeah, this is from Unimogger. It says, I have a few kayak caches planted. Some have repeatedly gone missing. Any suggestions for containers, placement, camo, etc.?
Well, watertight is, of course, essential. We recently did a series on a local lake where the containers weren't designed to be watertight over a long period, or perhaps even over winter. I think you had already mentioned the freeze-thaw cycles, and it was kind of disappointing to find the caches in a state of disrepair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry. You want to?
Nope.
You good? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, kind of along those lines, some of the caches up here plan on doing a lot more maintenance on their caches and will use some of the cheaper, easier to sacrifice containers. One of the favorites are the Gatorade bottles, where they'll take the Gatorade bottle and put the pill container, a nice watertight pill container inside for the log, and they just know that a couple times a year they have to go out and replace it, but it kind of takes care of that, but you do have to do that extra maintenance, and then you end up with all of these dead containers.
Mm. Yeah, assuming you cleaned them up. Yeah.
Sure.
That's all really good advice. Absolutely agree with that. And I think, as Mrs. Landmark was saying, our recent experience out on Burnaby Lake really showed what can happen if you just don't get out there and do the maintenance. We actually had seen some previous logs that the caches were not in great shape, so we brought some supplies with us and did some field maintenance for them, just because it's a really great series and we'd hate to see it get archived. But definitely agree with a lot of the thoughts there. Some of the things I was thinking about, one of the things is that's really important to consider is how you're going to anchor that. Some of the ones that we saw were anchored with fishing line, which is great for, again, that freeze for a short period of time. But depending where you are, you got to understand what your conditions are in the water. If you get a repeated freeze-thaw cycle like we do here, where you'll get a skim of ice, then it'll go, then you get another skim of ice, then it'll go, then you get another. That's going to really cut through that line fast. So you may want to look at upgrading it to the what's that, aluminum aircraft wire that you can get. That stuff that you can get it from Home Depot pretty cheap actually. And so you might want to think about how you're securing it. In addition to that, I really love the suggestions, and I'd actually thought of some of those other ones when we were doing the maintenance out in Burnaby Lake. That a really great system would be, I don't know if you guys have them, Nalgene water bottles. Is that just a Canadian brand? Do you guys have that stuff?
Yep. Yeah, they have the soft and the hard. I'm thinking you're probably talking about the soft side. Absolutely,
because the theory being if they hold water in well, they should also hold water out well, and they generally have that plastic strap that holds the lid to the bottle, and you can anchor around that, and that should last you a good couple of years.
And the reason for the soft would be if you're in one of these climates that has the freeze-thaw, you need a little give to it.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Terrell. So I would say use something like that. Then take a preform, which are also designed really to keep liquids in, and put that in a Ziploc bag, drop it inside an Nalgene container, and you should have a really robust water cache. Or really any larger container that has a rubber O-ring. I hadn't heard of the thermos thing before, but that's an interesting idea. I think we've found thermoses as caches before, but that was on land.
Yeah.
Well, I found a number of the thermoses in river-type situations, and it's usually underwater. So they attach the cable to it, and it's attached then to something onshore or just offshore, so that you have to actually go and retrieve the cache from somewhere else. And that
cool.
Seems to work pretty well. And because it's low enough in the water, usually in bigger rivers and stuff that don't freeze as easily, I think it's kind of immune to some of the freeze-thaw problems that we have with other containers and other placements.
That's very cool. One other idea I had thought of for this question was scaling down that system, because you don't always want to have a cache that's the size of your head. If you wanted to have a much smaller one, you could use they have preforms, slightly larger preforms, and you could stick a bison tube in the preform and then secure that. You'd have a really pretty discreet cache.
Those are all great ideas. I like those.
Oh, I've got all kinds of great ideas. Just ask Mrs. Landmonkey.
You got a lot of ideas.
Well, I was thinking as well, and and I don't remember the guy's name who said that his caches have gone missing. I was just thinking of the last lake that we went to. I think you can rent canoes there, so it gets pretty busy, I guess, in the summer. So I don't know if it's an area that is busy that people would pull up to something and see it and go, what's this, or think it's garbage, or if they saw something floating there. And anyways, I was just throwing that out there, because you could be in some areas where nobody would ever be there. Or you might be in an area where there's lots of people out. So the GeoArt that Nighthawk 700 mentioned reminds us of a series that we want to tackle in the Okanagan. It's in the interior of BC. It's called the Ducky series on Kalmalka Lake. It's one of the GC codes is GC53T0Y. I think it's a 0. But it's also in the shape of a duck. But I think from reading the description of it, it is on the lake side. But you can only get to that side of the lake by the kayak, because I think it's kind of more like I don't want to say a sheer.
Yeah, it's a pretty sheer drop into the water.
Drop on the far side. So it's not like you could bushwhack and hike around the lake to grab those. You would have to have a boat to get across. So we've had our eye on that.
I'm thinking jetpacks. All right, Adam in the live Q&A also suggested to pack a rope. It helps if you have a rope to drag the kayak to shore or to tie it to a tree.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the best caching names wrote us via email, Dr. Kasherstein. Have you heard? I heard your upcoming show is going to be about kayaking, so I thought I'd shoot you an email and mention our kayaking trail. Two of my buddies, Clan of Soups and Mac, and I, Dr. Kasherstein, thought it up and maintain it while on our local river group. The Shenandoah River Watchers supported the coin, or sponsored the coin. Boy, I cannot read tonight. The Shenandoah River Watchers sponsored the coin. You don't have to mention it on the show if you don't want to. Too late.
Too late.
But I thought I'd let you know about it. Love the show, and thanks for everything you cover. He goes on to say, as for the trail, it's called the, here we go, Shenandoah River Water Trail, and consists of 100 traditional caches placed along the local river in western Pennsylvania. The trail spans roughly 27 miles with plenty of spots to get out and stretch your legs, grab a snack, and continue down the trail. We've placed a letter in random caches, and when you complete the puzzle board for the trail, you earn a geocoin.
Nice.
Wow, that's nice. People do it in 3 sections. Usually there are major boat launches with easy access. Mm-hmm. The sections are all roughly 9 miles long with anywhere from 30 to 40 caches in each section, and it takes roughly 4 hours per section. There are several hotels in the area, which make it a weekend, and not to mention hundreds of other caches in the area. The first cache of the Geo Trail is GC 3TGD7. That's the Shenandoah Water Trail, or River Water Trail number 1, and Oxbow. I'm never going to get that series pronounced properly.
Just say shenanigan.
Oh, shenanigan.
No, that's the next podcast.
Oh, sorry. But wow, 100 caches all in a kayaking trail. That's incredible.
Awesome.
See, and this is why people get kayaks, is to get those 100 smileys and that $10 geocoin.
Well, if you're in good shape, you can swim the 27 miles.
This is true.
Good luck with that.
It's probably upriver against the current the whole way.
Well, so you just have to go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's an oxbow, so it shouldn't have too strong of a current. And there's probably an earth cache.
Jay sold. Oh, sorry.
We're going.
Mr. Land Monkey sold.
See, the nice thing is, since it's a inflatable kayak, you can just pack it and hit the road.
Oh, stay in the hotel overnight.
I was going to say, that won't be expensive on the plane at all. Oh, my goodness. That would be cool, though. That would be very cool. Daryl, do you mind if we do a shameless plug?
Oh, plug away.
Shamelessly. Wow. Next week, we're going to release the first of our kayak caching videos on our YouTube channel, Land Monkeys Geocaching Adventures. And it will include the unboxing and our first trip out. So if you want to watch us make fools of ourselves on a lake, check it out.
I want to watch the Land Monkeys
there.
making fools of themselves.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
This is the best thing about geocaching, is you inevitably entertain everyone around you.
Well, we did say shameless.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and sharing all of the info, but we are running a little bit long, so I think we're going to wrap this one up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we're going to talk in a little bit. Oh, we're going to talk. Now, I said at the beginning of the show that we ask a question and we get that answer on next week's show. So this week's question, we had a big news drop from geocaching.com this week. Knowing what that is might win you a prize from coinsandpins.com. So get your email titled Question 174. Get it ready. Send it to GeoGearHeads@CacheManiacs.com. In the body, include your geocaching.com screen name and the correct answer to that question, and we'll be talking about it much more next week. Now, you need to get that to us by April 21st, 2015. What? No. You need to tell us.
It's already past that date.
I jumped on there.
I think Daryl messed you up by putting a little extra info in where you're normally used to saying something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It's amazing how much you're used to reading things. Now, you need to tell us on... Oh, wait. Now it changed.
Well, I'll tell you what. If people listen to the Caching the Northwest podcast next, they'll know what to tell you.
So, get that email to us by April 28th, 2015. Now, last week, or just a couple days ago, geocaching.com announced a 1-year moratorium on what type of cache. That's it. That's all we want to know is what type of cache geocaching.com announced a 1-year moratorium on. Get that right and have it to us by, here's the dates and time I was looking for, 9 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern on April 29th, and your name will be dropped into the drawing for that prize from coinsandpins.com. So, Daryl, I'm pretty much convinced nobody's going to be able to get the right answer because I butchered that.
Maybe I should resum it real quick here. So April 21st, geocaching.com announced that what type of cache was going to be essentially banned for new caches to be listed for 1 year. So get that to us by April 29th, 6 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific, and that has to be titled Question 174. Send that to GeoGearHeads at CacheManiacs.com and make sure to include your screen name in the body with the answer.
Thanks for cleaning up after me.
Hey, no problem. I'm not sure I helped all that much anyway. But that's all for next week's show, which is April 30th, Randomize 33. We've got a whole pile of topics to talk about next week. Some great stuff, and we're going to be on with the GC Vlogger, so that should be pretty interesting. Or, cool. Sorry, maybe I should call him the Vlogger.
Vlogger, yes.
Vlogger? Yeah, okay. So make sure to tune in for that one, and you might win a live prize, which is a little cooler than the regular prizes that we get to send in for coinsandpins.com. But the week after that, we're going to have Cully, the author of How to Puzzle Cache, on to talk about puzzles once again. Then May 14th, Dano of Team Pugatch returns to talk about gear for your bike. That's the second time we're going to be talking about that, and the first time was, almost 3 years ago, I think.
It was one of the beta shows, was it not?
It was, yeah. So this is going to be exciting because I know a lot has changed, and we didn't even get close to covering everything we needed to in that show. Then, on the 21st of May, we have yet another randomized show, which will also have yet another live prize, so make sure to tune in for that one, too. That's May 21st. At 6, it's actually 6:10 p.m. Eastern, 9:10 p.m. or 6:10 p.m. Pacific, 9:10 p.m. Eastern.
I really messed you guys up tonight.
It's not you. It's
I think we can blame it on the land monkeys.
Okay,
everybody else does.
We'll blame it on the Canadian invasion.
There you go. You know what? I'm going to work really hard to get this last part right.
Okay. Well, but first we got one more show to tell you about. Because we like to give you guys 5 weeks of show because that gives you all the opportunity to get all that feedback in and to think about what you want to ask for some of these too. And because on May 28th, we're going to be talking with some of the folks from Open Caching North America and seeing what's up over there.
So check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2015 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cache with the Cachemaniacs.